It's no secret, Singapore football finds itself in the doldrums. The man tasked with improving Singapore football will be Bernard Tan, who was sworn in as the Football Association of Singapore president recently. Today, he joins us in the studio to field questions on the future of Singapore football. Hi Bernard, welcome to the Straits Times.
Hi Deepan.
First of all, I would use the word congratulations, but I don't think it's a position that many envy given the current state that Singapore football finds itself in. Why have you taken the step forward?
I was actually listening to some people describe it as a poison chalice, that really nothing good has come out from it. Just as a background, I've had many friends who have always asked me, why do you take this job up? Right? Nothing can come out, nothing good can come out of it. But Deepan, even when I stepped into the FAS, if somebody doesn't do it, then Singapore really has no hope. And I feel passionate about the game. I don't think that that's in doubt. I think what's key now is whether I feel I can bring it to a different place. I've had the experience of being a deputy president. Being a president is new to me, and I feel that given the fact that I've got 9 years of experience being a number two, well, not all as number two, but certainly a good period of it, it's now a time for me to actually make a difference. And if I can't make a difference, then either someone better can take that job, or we hope that someone will take notice and says that maybe the FAS needs a lot more help, which is somewhat my appeal during my inaugural speech as president.
Given the recent slump that we've seen, there's been a lot of criticism aimed at the FAS and especially at you as well, given that you were interim president at that time. Despite all this criticism, why did you think that this is something that I still want to do? Because it would quite be easy for anyone to say.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I've mentioned it many times before. My family actually wanted me to step down. They didn't think it was worth it. But to be honest with you, I think we need to distinguish between fair and unfair criticism. Part of the reason why Singapore football finds the way where it is not so much that we have done something wrong, but every other country has done something right. If you look across the board at the countries that we benchmark ourselves against, they have made significant improvements and strides and significant investments. I think we look back in Singapore, we've made incremental improvements, but that's not sufficient. If we want to compete and be competitive within ASEAN, we have to take a look at what they are doing and then our own constraints, and then try to actually overcome them. Just 3 days ago, Indonesia commissioned a new national training center. Fully built, it'll be about 55 million US, located in a new capital, opened by the president. These are the kinds of investments people are making in order to get their teams moving up in world rankings. So obviously, if we don't even match them, we're going to fall quite significantly behind. So if you ask me, has the slump that you have described, the doldrums that we're in, is this a product of 1 year, or is it a product of a lack of investment for 5 to 10 years? And I'd like to think it's the latter. So the key thing to do is to change that narrative, move back, invest in what we think is a good development system, and the results will then come, not immediately, but certainly in the next 5 to 10 years. But we have clarity of this.
But I will go into the investment in Singapore football and the need for more support. But one thing that I want to ask about is you did describe that the slump has been over the recent years. You've been in FAS since 2013. Is it fair for me to say that you have also been part of the establishment at the FAS for so long, and why would you becoming president mean something different?
It depends on what kind of constraints you accept. So if you accept that the current constraints that we have, are going to carry on in the future, I would say it's not possible for us to make any significant improvements. But I think that we are at the verge of those constraints being broken. First, we have successfully moved with UTR. This is actually the work of the last council as well, that we worked together, persuaded government agencies to support football as a special project for the nation. So if UTR it started in 2021, it's only 2 years old. We took 1 year during COVID to get all the programs being sorted out, started to launch the programs here, and this is just the beginning. So I'm optimistic that represents one change, but that's not enough. So we need to push several other changes in order to make sure that Singapore can move to a better position. So my answer to you is this. We have observed, we know that a lot more needs to be done. We've begun that journey, and hopefully with the remaining 2 years I have as president, we can actually start to run with those programs.
So let me put it this way. Would you say that you were satisfied with what you contributed to Singapore football since 2013 before you have become president now?
The answer is no, because we haven't moved Singapore football in the right direction. So obviously, we did something about it. I have a vision, and I want to bring FAS to where it needs to be. So I will ask that we give this period of time where I have control of the wheel to actually try to get Singapore in the right direction.
And the segue after your response is, what is that vision? What is your vision for Singapore football?
I think we need to be built on a number of pillars. The first one is obviously a lot more funding into a lot of the programs that we need. And that's required actually across all levels. The key obviously is development of youth. Because unless our youth are playing at a much higher level at an earlier age, their opportunities will be closed as they go upwards. Many people will tell you that you need to start elite development of kids at the age of maybe 12. That age bar has now moved in many other countries to 10, some even to 8. When I say elite, it's almost like learning how to be a competitive swimmer or a concert pianist. You practice 5 to 6 times a week, right? Very few footballers in Singapore actually undergo that regime. We need to make that as standard if you want to play elite football. So the duration of practice is one thing, but you also need the quality of practice. And that means in having modern techniques of practicing football. This means quality coaches. And the last thing is obviously quality infrastructure that will help you have good competition. You need to play often at a high level. And that means you need to either have competitive leagues in Singapore or bring the best of our players overseas or invite overseas teams to come and play so that we experience football at a much higher level. And that needs to consistently come across. It is only at the end that you actually develop good football teams. Deepan, it's not a secret. You do the same thing for swimmers, you do the same thing for tennis players. You honestly can't believe that our tennis players here can actually improve and be world standard or even ASEAN standard if they play domestically. They have to play in international tournaments. So this is the thing that we need to do, and all this requires funding and money.
You talk about funding and money. Of course, that needs convincing stakeholders. How are you planning to do that, and do you have a sense of how tough it's going to be?
It's going to be very tough. The thing is that we need to change the minds of people who are grant givers, people who are donors, people who are corporate sponsors, that football actually matters and that we can make a difference. Unless we start to do that, really it's quite tough. I'm also urging people to come in at the beginning of the journey, not at the end. So we've got to paint a picture that it is worth supporting, that there will be tangible benefits and outcomes will be observable. So you've got to set targets. I think grant givers don't mind giving money, provided at the end of the day, they can see outcomes that are tangible, and we intend to do that.
But I have to ask, again, going back to the fact that you have been there since 2013.
Yes.
Why is this now an endeavor? Why wasn't this an endeavor, 5 years ago, 4 years ago? Why is it that now we are asking for financial backing from corporates?
I think we always wanted more money. The question is, if that wasn't forthcoming, Deepan, do we sit down and say, oh, I've tried it before, therefore no one's given, I give up? No, you don't. So now that I have an opportunity, I will try a different way. I think we need to keep trying. If we say to ourselves, the other option is obviously to rely on public funding, which I think is limited, or to do with what we have today, which is perhaps one of the philosophies previous presidents had, that we'll try to do with what we have today. I have come to a conclusion that that's just not possible. It's not possible. If we want our teams to improve, we really need extra funding to support programs that we currently don't have, infrastructure that we currently don't have, competitions that we currently don't participate in. We've got to.
Okay.
Yeah.
One thing that I have to also ask is, football is one sport. There are plenty of other sports in Singapore who will also demand for support.
Precisely. So,
Why should football be different? In your opinion, at least, why should football be that sport?
no, you hit the nail on the head. This is the argument we always face when we go to grant givers, that there needs to be some form of equity to other sports. But I like football's funding not to be the expense of other sports. But what I will say is that if you do fund football, the payoffs for the country are very much different. Deepan, let's be very honest. If we win or lose in volleyball, for example, and no disrespect to the volleyball team, right? To Malaysia, I don't think it will have a single bit of emotion. Football is special because it is our nation's most favorite game. It has been all my life. It continues to be, and I argue that actually increasing in popularity given the commercialization of football that we have seen recently. Right? Almost everybody supports an EPL team or some sort. So football is front and center. It's main diet for many people. And somehow we peg the mood of the nation and the national pride to how good our football team does. We're not unique. Many countries do, right? Perhaps Australia, now that the rugby team is out, has a wounded national pride. They're angry, right? For them, rugby is a very big sport. But for most of the rest of the world, it's football. I'm sure you ask any German how they feel about their country and their pride, right? German football used to be their flag bearer. Today, it's not. So I'd argue for Singapore, football has a special place. It's the most popular sport. It's the only sport that can fill the national stadium, get us singing. It's also a sport that cuts across many segments of society. It cuts across all social strata, right? Rich or poor, we all love football. It cuts across all races. We all watch football. It cuts across all age groups. Grandparents bring their kids and they all can support the same team at the same time. It's one of the unique sports that basically unites the country. So I'd argue that it has a special place, right? And it deserves consideration for special funding.
Give me a sense, why is it that it hasn't taken off in terms of backers coming in? What are they saying? When you approach them, what is the reason, they don't want to get involved?
Well, let me put it this way. Maybe the way that we have presented the project needs to be better, right? If it's just, can you help my national team? Can you sponsor my national team to put name? I think that's probably, almost like a handout. I think we need to express the fact that, look, we have targets. Like, for example, we want to prepare a very good SEA Games team for 2029. But that requires us to now put investments in the 15-year-old. Will you walk us on this journey with us to produce a squad when Singapore hosts the SEA Games that we are all proud of? I think that value proposition may be a little bit more powerful. And then the expression would be, what do we need to do? This is what we propose. Do you have any other ideas? And this is what it will cost. And I think those kinds of packaging may actually be more palatable than just putting the hand out and saying, can you help my national team?
Okay.
Yeah.
We've talked about your vision, what you expect in the future and, what kind of help that you need. But how did we get here? You talked about how it's not so much that we have deproved, it's more that we have stood still.
Absolutely.
Why have we done that? What has gone wrong?
So I'll put words in some, I'm happy to talk quite openly. If you talk to the previous General Secretary, Winston Lee, Winston will tell you that they had actually come up with a very sophisticated plan. But a lot of the plan didn't come into fruition because it wasn't funded. So you can put the blame on two sides, right? One, is it realistic to come up with a wish list and say that it's a plan? Because a plan needs to be funded. So maybe in the past, a lot of things were wish lists. If it remains funded, it definitely is not part of a plan and doesn't get executed. I think the FAS had many wish lists in the past, right? A lot of cut and paste, perhaps a lot of experimentation, right, with different trajectories. Again, I think I've seen sufficient evidence of what I think will work Every country needs to determine its own formula. Singapore is unique in many ways. Our ecosystem is a very unique ecosystem. So we need to work on what we think will actually work for Singapore. We also know there's no endless pot of gold, so it's no use for me to paint, I want to have an Aspire Academy like Qatar does. Never going to happen. So we've got to cut the cloth in a way that we can fund and actually bring it to fruition. So my argument to you is, I think in the past, we had many plans, which were really wish lists. It's time to stop that and start working funding against the plans. Yeah.
The association, of course, I know is working hard in turning our fortunes around. Are you confident that you have the right people in the right places at the FA to do the kind of work that you want them to do?
No, it is key that you have good people. So I don't think anyone in the FA or in any organization should be complacent that I'm doing a great job and therefore I'm going to get this for life. I think what we need to do is to have very clear ideas of what we need to accomplish, study to say whether those people are the correct people to lead them. Sometimes you need different people at different times in that same job, right? And then go ahead and take the difficult decision and says, I need this kind of people, and therefore, I'm going to look for them and make sure that they fill those posts. So I think this is one of the key challenges. If you want to build a vision going forward, the people that are on the team needs to be people who are aggressive and builders, right? Not somebody who runs or maintains the status quo. And I think that's absolutely correct.
Far too often, this is my opinion at least, that when we whether it's in coaching or various other departments within the FAS, second chances are given and third chances are given. Do you feel you have that ruthless streak in you to make changes when necessary? And is that something that we have to do?
I think you wait and see.
I'll hold on to that for sure. Do you think critics, and I consider myself a critic as well, and that's because I love Singapore football.
Sure.
But do you think critics in general are too harsh on Singapore football?
No, look, I can't control opinion. And when it comes to football, it is the most, I would say, vicious of all environments because everyone has an opinion. A man with a dog has his opinion, a man with a cat will have his opinion, even sometimes a lady will have his opinion. And we are easily swayed by what we read on social media because there's so much written about football. So football just tends to be talked about, dialogued about, and so there's a lot of emotions and opinions that come with it. I have learned over the last year to take all these things in your stride. It's part of the duty. I would take criticism if I understand it comes from a place of that the person is concerned, he cares for the game, he's informed about it, and most important, he's wanting to be helpful to me. But if it comes from any other place, I would just take it and leave it in a particular position.
Okay.
Right? I think that's fair. I'll be honest with you, in my council right now, I've probably served the longest minus two other individuals who have been there and stalwarts. So most of the issues that I've seen, I probably have a good sense of it. Sometimes, of course, history, like what happened at the start of the S-League, I need to ask my fellow colleagues. But certainly, I think I've got the experience. But more importantly, if you have something to say, I've never turned anybody away. If I have the depth and I know of the concern, I will actually spend time telling you what I feel and then listening and considering what you think is important and take it on board. But at the end of the day, I also realize one thing, Deepan. When the shit hits the fan, right? Yeah, the president of affairs holds the can, right? And so I realize the weight of the responsibility. In the end, the decision is still mine. I will take inputs, I will take what people say, but in the end, I will still hold the can. So I will take, the difficult decisions if necessary.
Okay. A lot of what you've said today, revolves around the future. When I speak to fans, a key concern that they have is, yes, sure, we can be patient for what comes in the future, But what about now? You know,
Now.
how do we cling on to a hope? You know, what do you have to say to that?
If you look at our teams, the question you need to ask ourselves is, if with the players that we have, can we do better? Right? Can we do better? Look, actually our players are of some quality. I'm not saying they are at the level of, you know, some of the leading Thai players, but really at the end of the day, we are generally able to compete. So the question is, why are we not able to do that? So if we recognize that the Singapore teams for the next 5 to 6 years will always be playing teams that are technically better than us, we've got to compensate it in 2 ways. We've got to be more aggressive physically and prepared to compete physically, and that includes fitness. And second, we've got to be better organized. And so you must raise the discipline organizational set for our teams. Now I'm saying this not because I'm a superb coach. It's a fact that we are going to play against better teams. And so always my question to all the coaches is, if you play against a better team, how would you approach the game? And everyone will tell you, you need to retain compact in order for you to be difficult to score against, and then seek the opportunities that you can actually convert. And so what we train and what we play as a national team for the next 5 to 6 years actually will have to reflect where we realistically are in our ability band. So my wish, right, for the Singapore team, and it's something we want to effect, is with our players, can we achieve outcomes that are better than what we've seen in the last few years? This requires more centralized training, which is the appeal I've made, you know, that we need to sacrifice a little bit for the national team, because we need the players to prepare, organize, be physically ready, right, in order to compete against much better teams as we go into the international stable.
Okay.
I say, you know, in international game, in the SPL games, you can make one mistake, get away with it. In international games, you get punished immediately. And if you have one chance, you don't take it, you may not get one again. So you need to take your chances when they come.
What will be done to improve our league for the next season in terms of rules or number of teams or fan engagement?
You've heard of talk of a privatized league for a long time. So next year will be a transition year in which we prepare the grounding, and my suspicion is that will probably, and the target will be in 2025. So there are maybe 3 things that we're looking at, right? The first is the number and intensity of games. So Deepan, you know, my own sense is that we need more games in a season. Part of the reason is there are 2 good effects of this. Number 1 is you get into a tempo of playing a game every 3 to 4 days, right? Which is what you get during tournament football. Right? If you go to Asian Games, Olympic Games, World Cup, AFF, that's what you do. So we should be used to it. Let's be honest, right? And not, you know, prepare for it only when we go for these tournaments. This will make us more resilient. But more importantly, when you have more games, you have to use your squad, which means that your squad has more depth and you will develop players with more minutes. And I think that will be better for Singapore football in total. So the first is to look forward to more matches. The second, I think, is we are looking, and the rules have not been fixed yet, at introducing more foreigners. I know we've gone 2 ways before, but part of the reason is because more of our clubs want to be competitive in the AFC tournaments. But more importantly, we're also looking at some of the foreigners coming much younger, so that they have a chance to actually love our country and become Singaporeans in the end. So we're looking at opportunities to attract much younger foreigners to come in as part of our naturalization opportunities and strategies. We're not, again, the only country that does this. Malaysia does it very well, right? And so there's other countries like Indonesia and the Philippines. So we will be looking at doing that as well. And then obviously, you know, in terms of the nature of the number of teams, we're looking to increase. Now, whether that's going to happen, it's going to be a question mark, but nevertheless, if we have more teams, the league will be much more attractive and much more exciting. But if you ask from a point of view, what is it that, you know, we want from a national team point of view, and obviously if we see the league as part of contributing to the national team, I think the fact that we have more games, a much higher level of intensity and tempo in our games, it's actually improved already. Not kidding. From the time I watched, from the time I first joined the FAS till now, the standard of play has improved quite significantly. We're obviously looking at it going another notch. So maybe getting younger players into the field, maybe getting additional foreign player will help to raise the intensity. Of course, good coaches that play that high intensity game, the high pressing, the fast transitions up and down, I think that will help.
Your closing remarks, of course. I started the show by talking about how Singapore football finds itself in the doldrums. The fans, some of them, have already lost patience. Some are feeling that, their patience is wearing thin. What would be your message to Singaporean football fans to, stay with you through the process?
Don't stay with me, stay with football, right? So we are all here because we love the game and we want Singapore to do better. I think we have not done enough. And that's the message I'm trying to get across. It's not that we've neglected it, it's just that other people have paid a huge amount of attention to it. And so if we want to be competitive, we need to up our game by 2 or 3 notches. We're going to start doing that. We know we're going to be playing against superior teams, but that doesn't mean that the Singapore heart and spirit is such that we keel over and says, let's give up. We will fight and we will play every game as if it's the most important game. Every tournament I go is the next game is your most important game. And what happened before is regardless. Even when we're out, that's the message I gave. So actually, I was very pleased with our under-23 squad after they drew with Guam and they were out of the tournament, that they still went on and played their heart out to a 2-2 draw with Vietnam, right? To me, that's being showing the Singapore spirit, and I'm glad that they're starting to do that.
All right, Bernard, thank you so much for joining us and wishing you and the Singapore football all the success for the future.
Thank you, and then I want to thank your audience. I asked the audience who loved football, remain fans, and I appreciate your support.
Thank you.
Thank you.